the request of my good friend, Father Paul, who felt it was necessary that I would share with you some of my personal experiences that have led me on my journey today. So, bear with me. So as I mentioned, the apostolate was formed in 1986 and 87. At that time, I was totally unaware of Medjugorje. In early 1988, my wife Darlene, I should have her standing up here with me so she can continue correctly. She became consumed with information that one of our children came home from school with regarding these supernatural events, and she couldn't get enough of it. I had no interest at all. So Paul Bonacci, previous to Father Paul Bonacci, was going on pilgrimage to Medjugorje in early 1988, and Darlene asked him if he would take our wedding rings there and have them blessed, which he did. Now, I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, our family went to church, the kids went to St. Mary's. I thought I was a pretty good Catholic, but I just wasn't into Medjugorje, and I did not feel as though I was being invited. And people say that you don't just choose to go to Medjugorje, the Blessed Mother invites you to go. And I didn't feel that at all, but my journey was about to begin. At the time I was working at Gould's Pumps, and I used to see Mr. Dwello all the time, and he was planning a pilgrimage in August for a group from our parish. There were about 85 people were signed up to go, and Darlene wanted to go, and my mother was legally blind, bad knees, more ailments than you can imagine, and she wanted to go. So I thought, I can't let them go to some communist country without me. So I decided to go too, but it wasn't as a pilgrim. It was more of a protective husband and son. Well, that's about when my control of things came to an end. There were three things I'd like to highlight. I can stand up here and probably tell stories all day, which is why Padre wanted me to do this, because we've been there several times now. But in August of 1988, we traveled to Medjugorje, and it took about 24 hours or so, and we arrived late at night. So I remember trying to be the leader, you know, like, okay, we're not going to go climbing any mountains in the morning, it's been a long day. And there's a bunch of people in this room that were on that trip. Raise your hand if you were on that trip in August of '88. Thank you, there's a few people in the room. So, that night we talked and we said, we're going to get a good night's sleep, we'll get up in the morning and explore the village and find the church, etc. But no climbing mountains or anything, it's been a long, long day. Right. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, Father Shannon was up and outside of our rooms going, come on you monkeys, get up, we're going to go climb the mountain. So, there we go, and I grabbed my permanent marker, which is advised by a friend, and we started to climb. Now, the permanent marker, a friend of mine that worked at Gould's had been to Medjugorje, and he said that, people climbed Mount Krizevac and they brought pieces of paper with family names and things written on them, and they would leave this stuff all around, but every night the pilgrims would go up there and gather it all up and burn it. So he said, if you want to leave something permanent, bring a marker with you. So I did. So Darlene and I climbed the mountain, and we got up to the top, and we tried to find an inconspicuous spot. Didn't want it to look like graffiti. And we went behind the cross, and partway down the hill on the right-hand side, we found a nice little stone. And I wrote Dave, Darlene, Brian, Lisa, and Lori, 8/15/88 on the rock. Well, fast forward a year or so, and it's about 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, I think, and my phone rang. It was Sister Ann Marvin, was at Joanne Vacca's house, and she picked up this book off the shelf, and she opened it up and she called us and said, did you write your names on a rock in Medjugorje? Now, Joanne tells me I don't normally buy $20 books at a bookstore, and I don't know why I picked up that paperback book, but I did, and I never read it. So here Sister Ann picks it up. Now, I'll put these out so you can look, but this is actually a photograph that Darlene took of the rock that we wrote our names on. And this book has the close-up
Oh, wow.
That's what
Oh,
brought
my
our
goodness.
names on. Now, the book was, the photographer was Croatian. The book was published in Germany and printed in Yugoslavia.
Oh, wow.
What are the odds that it's going to find its way back to Waterloo and find us? So, that's number one. Later that day, which happened to be August 15th, the Feast of the Assumption, we're going to climb Apparition Hill to be with the visionaries, along with thousands of other pilgrims. And my mother, with her bad knees and little eyesight, was going to try to climb. Now, it's not like a giant mountain, but it's treacherous because every step you fall down there, the stones and everything else, every step was a chore, and there were just literally thousands of people climbing. So we got about halfway, and she gave up. She said, I can't go any further, and she found a rock to sit down, and she said, I'm just going to wait here, you guys go ahead. And I said, Mom, you came halfway around the world, you can't stop now. So we trudged on, and we made it to the top, and we were there when Our Lady appeared to the visionaries with 3 angels, and she blessed us all with her special blessing. We spent the night on top of Apparition Hill. We knew it wasn't going to be possible for us to navigate back down the hill at night in the dark with all those people. So we just sat up there with my mother and we watched the sunrise, and she got to appreciate what she had accomplished the next morning. Lena's going to tell you more about the special blessing, which was really the best part of that whole story. But we're going to save that for a little later, and she's going to go into more detail. So number 3, Don Duello, it was 1991, I believe, and Yvonne was in the United States going from church to church and speaking, and he was staying at Don's house, and one night Don said, we said, would you like to bring Yvonne over? We'll have dinner. And so Yvonne comes to our house. We had our family there, my parents, my wife's parents, my brother and his family. We all had a nice dinner, and we had a statue in the corner. And after dinner, it was coming close to the time when Yvonne was going to have his apparition, and I happened to look out in my backyard, the picture window in the backyard. People were kneeling in our backyard. There were people all around our house. I went out to the front, and the front yard was covered with people that were on the porch. So I opened the door, and we let everybody in, and the next thing you know, my house is shoulder to shoulder people. So being a photographer, we couldn't even get to the closet where a camera was to take a picture. It was just wall-to-wall people. So Yvonne got up and went over and knelt down in front of the statue of Our Lady, and he started his ecstasy, his apparition. And my brother and sister-in-law were there with their daughter, our niece Katie, who was about a year old. And they had put her on the floor, and she was playing around. Well, Yvonne knelt down, and she let out a screech that got everybody's attention. My brother thought somebody had stepped on her fingers. And he reached down and he grabbed her, picked her up, and she looked into the corner where Yvonne was standing and started blowing kisses. So, some things, and I could go on, but those are 3 I thought I would just highlight and share with you. Came back from our 88 trip. Father Shannon asked me to join the board of directors in 1989. And the guy that didn't want to know anything about this stuff. I was appointed the executive director in 1990, and my wife and I have been to Medjugorje 5 times altogether. We went in 88, 90. In 1991, during the Gulf War, we took our entire family. We went back in 2010 and 2014. I'd just like to leave you with this. There's some things that I've learned. Number 1, I'm not in control. Number 2, the Catholic faith is real. We all read the catechisms and the Old Testament, and they're almost like fairy tales when you're growing up, but it's all real stuff. Number 3, I was being invited. And lastly, maybe you're all being invited too.
Thank you, Dave, very much. The board
was really struggling for a while about doing this day and what do we do on this day and who would present. And we're not a very efficient board of directors because everybody on the board is a behind-the-scenes person. So it's like, who's going to do this presentation? They all went like this. Not me, not me. So, but I really had asked Dave to think about sharing some of his stories because they are, to me, signs that God is real, that God is working, and that God cares. For a long time, I would call things like a picture of a rock or a little baby squealing coincidences. I would call it a God incidence because I thought God was working. So one time I was talking to a friend of mine. I said, I had this God incidence the other day. And she said, what is that? So I explained it. She said, that's a God wink. And I said, a what? She said, a God wink. Are any of you old enough to remember on ABC when they used to do Schoolhouse Rock? Maybe as a little kid you saw that, conjunction, junction, what's your function, Well, the guy that did that, Squire Rushnell, he had been a producer on Good Morning America, and then he got into doing that. And he started noticing a lot of spiritual coincidences. So he started writing a book, and then he and his wife were looking for a title. And without giving away too much of the story, in case you pick up any of his books, they came up with that God wink. And to paraphrase what it meant was, it's like when you as a little kid get to sit at the adult table for the first time at Thanksgiving, and you're nervous as the dickens. And as you're sitting there wondering about what to do, you see your uncle sitting across from you, and he just smiles, and he gives you a little wink. Meaning, it's okay, I got you, I'll help you. I'm here for you. And that's the way he described it. So, Mr. Rushnell has a ton of God wink books out there that just really show that God is working. The Miracle of Medjugorje. I wanted to do a short history first. Some of you have been there, some of you have not. Some of you know the history, some have forgotten it, and some never heard the history. So on approximately 6 o'clock on June 24th, in the area of a hill known as Podbro, and excuse my pronunciations, my Croatian's not the best, there were 6 children, preteen and teen, who saw an incredibly beautiful young woman with a little child in her arms. She didn't say anything to them, but indicated with gestures that they should come closer. Surprised and frightened, they were afraid to come near, even though they thought immediately that she may be Our Lady. On the second day, June 25th of 1981, the children agreed to meet once again at the same place that Our Lady had previously appeared, in the hope of seeing her again. All of a sudden, there was a flash of light. The children looked up and saw Our Lady, this time without the child. She was smiling and joyful and was indescribably beautiful. With her hands, she gestured to them to come closer. The children braced themselves and went up to her. They immediately fell to their knees and began to pray the Our Father, Hail Mary, and Glory Be. Our Lady prayed together with them, except when they prayed the Hail Mary. After the prayer, she began to speak with the children. One, Ivanka, first of all, asked her about her mother who had died 2 months previously. And another girl, Mirjana, asked Our Lady for some sign to be given to show the people that they were neither lying nor crazy, as some people had said. Our Lady finally left the children with the words, God be with you, my angels. Before that, when the children asked her if they would see her the following day, she replied by nodding her head. According to the visionaries, the whole encounter was indescribable. On that day, 2 of the children, who had made up the previous group, were missing. Ivan Ivankovich and Milka Pavlovich. They were replaced by 2 others, Maria Pavlovich and Yakov Kolo. And from that day onwards, according to these 6 children, Our Lady regularly appears to them. Milka and Ivan, who were present on the first day, did not see Our Lady again, even though they returned to the apparition site in hope of seeing her. The third day, June 26th, the children, full of anticipation, waited at around 6 o'clock, which was when she previously appeared. They were going towards the same place to meet her there. They were very happy, although the joy was mixed with fear, wondering what the outcome of all this would be. Despite all this, the children could feel some sort of inner strength attracting them to meet Our Lady. Suddenly, while the children were still on the way, a light flashed 3 times. To them, and to those following them, it was a sign indicating Our Lady's whereabouts. On that third day, Our Lady appeared even higher up than on the previous days. All at once, Our Lady disappeared, but when the children began to pray, she reappeared. She was cheerful and smiling serenely, and once again, her beauty was overwhelming. As they left their houses, some older women advised them to carry holy water with them to make sure it was not of Satan. When they were with Our Lady, Vicka took the water and splashed it in the direction of the vision, saying, "If you are our Blessed Mother, please stay, and if you are not, go away from us." Our Lady smiled at this and remained with the children. Then Mirjana asked her name, and she replied, "I am the Blessed Virgin Mary." On the same day, coming down Podbro, Our Lady appeared one more time, this time, however, only to Maria, saying, "Peace, peace, peace, and only peace." Behind her, Maria could see a cross, after which Our Lady repeated in tears the following words, "Peace must reign between man and God and between all people." This area where this took place is about halfway up to the apparition site. The fourth day, June 27th, Our Lady appeared 3 times to the children. On that occasion, the children asked all kinds of questions, and Our Lady responded. For priests, she gave this message: "May the priests firmly believe, and may they take care of the faith of the people." Once again, Yaakov and Mirjana asked for a sign, because people had begun to accuse them of lying and taking drugs. "Do not be afraid of anything," Our Lady replied. Before parting, when asked if she would come again, she indicated she would. On the way down Podbro, Our Lady appeared one more time to say goodbye with the words, "May God be with you, my angels. Go in peace." The fifth day, on June 28th, big crowds were gathering from all parts, even from early hours of the morning. By noon, there were about 15,000 people. On the same day, the parish priest, Father Jozo Zovko, examined the children and what they had seen and heard in the previous days. At the usual time, Our Lady appeared again. The children prayed with her, and afterwards they questioned her. Vicka, for example, asked, "My dear Lady, what do you want from us, and what do you want from our priests?" Our Lady replied, "The people should pray and firmly believe." Regarding priests, she replied that they should firmly believe and help others to do the same. On that day, Our Lady came and went many times. During one of the times, the children asked her why she doesn't appear in the parish church for everyone to see. She replied, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." Even though the crowds were pushing them with their questions and curiosity, and the day was heavy and sultry, the children felt as though they were in heaven. The sixth day, June 29th of 1981, the children were taken to Mostar for a medical examination, after which they were proclaimed healthy. The statement of the head doctor was, the children aren't crazy. The person who brought them here must be, though." The crowds on Apparition Hill that day were greater than ever. As soon as the children arrived at the usual place and began to pray, Our Lady appeared. On that occasion, the Blessed Mother exhorted them to have faith, saying, "The people should believe firmly and have no fear." On that day, a doctor who was following and observing them during the apparition desired to touch Our Lady. The children guided her hand to the place where Our Lady's shoulder was, and she felt a tingling sensation. The doctor, even though an atheist, had to admit, here, something strange is happening. On that same day, a child was miraculously healed by the name of Danielle Sitka. Her parents had brought her to Medjugorje, praying specifically for a healing. Our Lady had promised that this would come about if the parents prayed and fasted and strongly believed. The child was healed. The seventh day. On June 30th, 1981, two young girls suggested to the children to go by car further away to be able to stroll in peace. Really, their intention was to bring them away from the area and keep them until after the normal apparition time had passed. However, even though the children were far away from Podbro at the usual time of the apparition, it was as if an interior call prompted them to ask to be let out of the car. As soon as they did and said a prayer, Our Lady drew near to them from the direction of Podbro, which was now over a kilometer away. She prayed 7 Our Fathers, 7 Hail Marys, and 7 Glory Bees. What the children had commonly called the sevens was a common practice among the people. And so the two girls' trick had no effect. Soon after this, the police began to hinder the children and the pilgrims going up on Podbro, the site of the apparitions. The children, and soon after even the crowds, were forbidden to go there. But Our Lady continued to appear to them in secret places, in their homes and in the fields. The children had already gained confidence and openly spoken with Our Lady, eagerly seeking her advice, listening to her warnings and messages. The events of Medjugorje continued in this fashion up until the 15th of January in 1982. In the meantime, the parish priest began to host the pilgrims in the church, enabling them to participate in the rosary and to celebrate the Eucharist. The children also gave out the rosary. Our Lady sometimes appeared to them in the church at that time. Even the parish priest himself, once while praying the rosary, saw Our Lady. Immediately, he broke off and spontaneously started to sing a popular hymn, "Oh, how beautiful you are, most blessed Virgin Mary." The whole church could see that something unusual was happening to him. Afterwards, he stated that he had seen her. And so, he who up to that time had only been doubtful, but openly, even against rumors of the apparition, became the defender of the children. He testified his support of the apparitions, even to the point of serving a prison sentence. From the 15th of January 1982 onwards, the children saw Our Lady in a closed-off area of the parish church. The parish priest arranged this because of the newly arisen difficulties, and sometimes even dangers, which provided themselves for the visionaries. Previously, the children had ensured that this was in accord with Our Lady's wishes. Because of the prohibitions of the diocesan bishop, however, from April 1985 onwards, the children ceased to use the area of the church as an apparition site. Instead, they were led to a room in the parish house. All this time, from the beginning of the apparitions up until today, there have been only 5 days when none of the children saw Our Lady. Our Lady didn't always appear in the same place either, nor to the same group, nor individuals, nor did her apparitions always last a specified time. Sometimes the apparitions lasted 2 minutes, sometimes an hour. Neither did Our Lady appear at the children's will. Sometimes they prayed and waited, but Our Lady didn't appear until a little while afterwards, unexpectedly and unforewarned. And sometimes she appeared to one and not to the others. If she hadn't promised an appointed time, nobody knew when she would appear or if she would appear. Neither did she appear always to just the aforesaid visionaries, but to others also of different age, stature, race, education, and walks of life. All this suggests that the apparitions are not a product of the imagination. It depends neither on time nor place, nor desire, nor the prayer of pilgrim or visionary, but moreover on the will of God who permits it. And so that's a background of the first days and first years of Medjugorje. In terms of the geography, we've been talking about Podbro, Apparition Hill, small hill. There's another place, it's more of a mountain than a hill, It's called in Croatian Krizevac, or Cross Mountain. And it's where the parishioners of Medjugorje, back in 1934, constructed a concrete cross 27 feet 10 inches high. The idea for the construction of the huge cross came from the Vatican. At the time, Pope Pius XI proposed that crosses be built on hills and mountains all over the world to commemorate the 1900th anniversary of Jesus' death on the cross. One of the priests who responded to the proposal was Father Bernardin Smoljan, the parish priest from Medjugorje. He presented this idea to the parishioners who embraced it heartily. The work began, parishioners carrying heavy loads on their hands and back, trudging up the hill. With enthusiastic support, the construction of the huge cement cross was completed in 3 weeks. Father blessed the cross, celebrated Holy Mass on top of the hill, which has been since called Cross Mountain. In the last 3 decades, the mountain has become one of the favorite places visited by pilgrims in Medjugorje. Many pilgrims have climbed this mountain, praying the Stations of Cross along the way. In the process, they've realized Jesus' profound love for us and undergoing his passion. Embedded in the concrete cross is a piece from the relic of the true cross, the one on which Jesus was crucified, venerated by Christians. The relic of the true cross is housed in the Church of the Holy Cross of Jerusalem in Rome, and the Medjugorje piece was a gift from Pope Pius XI. And since 1934, Mass has been celebrated on Krizevac on the first Sunday after the Feast of the Nativity of Mary, the Feast of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross. In 1988, bronze relief sculptures were set up representing the Stations of the Cross on the way up Mount Krizevac. The work of Italian sculptor Professor Carmelo Puzzolo, Krizevac became the Calvary of the Shrine of Medjugorje. And the third place we focus on is St. James Church, the parish church. The first church was built in 1897, but after the First World War, due to unstable ground, it became unusable. Then the parishioners began plans to build a new church with 2 pointed towers near the site of the old one. The new church was consecrated on January 19, 1969. It is believed that the building of the new church was part of the divine plan all along, something we might call a God wink. At the time, the parish consisted of only 400 families, but St. James Church can accommodate more than 2,000 people. Why did the parishioners build such a big church and have it dedicated to the Apostle St. James the Greater, the patron saint of pilgrims? The answer points to the possibility that the Virgin Mary is preparing the parish of Medjugorje for its special role in the spiritual world. St. James Church is now the center of sacramental and prayer life, not only for its parishioners, but also for pilgrims all over the world. At the entrance to the church grounds stands the stone statue of the Queen of Peace, the work of the sculptor Dino Felici. A fenced-in park situated inside the traffic circle to the east of the shrine reminds us of the place where the old parish church once stood. So we have 3 places: Apparition Hill, Cross Mountain, and the parish church. And of course, 3 is one of those biblical numbers, number of the Trinity. And so again, things that, if you want, can be taken as a sign that God is present, God is real, and God is working. In terms of the miracle of Medjugorje, well, Our Lady appearing to anyone is definitely miraculous. And the history of the church has known her presence in this way many different times. Fatima, Lourdes, just a few, Guadalupe, Mexico, and so we know that she is present. Notice that when she comes, she is dressed, she is in appearance one of the people to whom she's appearing. If you've ever seen the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe on the tilma of Juan Diego, she looks as an Aztec Indian woman. She was from the Middle East. She was a Jewish girl. How could she look that way? When she appeared to Bernadette in Lourdes, and Bernadette was being questioned, they asked how she heard her. Well, she speaks to me. Does she speak French? Yes. but she speaks the patois, the local dialect. She wasn't speaking formal French, so she even spoke the language of the people, and so on. She appears as a mother concerned for her children, and her mission is always to draw people closer to Jesus, her son. That's the miracle of Medjugorje and all apparition places, that Mary is a mother for us, and she wants to lead us as her children closer to God and closer to our brother, Jesus. But there are other miracles that accompany Medjugorje. The miracle of the sun. The fact that people could first look at the sun without burning their retinas out. Not everybody received that gift, and unfortunately there were people that tried to force it. Well, if you can see it, so can I. Oh, that hurts. Yeah, exactly. You can't force God into a miracle for you. God does what God wants to do. That's why they gave him the job. Another miracle is that people would have their rosaries, whether they were purchased in Medjugorje or purchased wherever and brought with the pilgrims. And if the chains were another color other than gold, a lot of times people would look and all of a sudden all of the metal pieces on the rosary were gold colored in nature. The body of Christ on the cross, the little INRI sign on the top of the cross, and all the chains and all the metals in between. Why does it happen? Nobody's ever given an official answer. When I was asked on my first trip, one of the young people that we were with, why would that happen? I said, well, most of the world is on the gold standard. We use gold as a way of saying this is how valuable something is. And so if the world is on the gold standard, maybe God is working with us in ways that we can relate. And saying, you value gold? Okay, what color are your rosaries? Gold. They're valuable. Use them. Pray with them. But one of the biggest miracles was on a trip in October of '97. There was a young man for whom I was a spiritual director. He was studying to be a priest. He was at the North American College in Rome, and he was to be ordained deacon. And since his family was in the United States, in Fairport, New York, a lot of us wanted to go with them to just support him. So on this big day in his life, he's not alone. And the small group I was with wanted to take a side trip to Medjugorje. And we did. And as we're walking around and praying and going to Mass and everything, people were talking about some of the supernatural essence that they were experiencing. But one of the crew, a woman who was in church ministry for 22 years, I asked her, I said, what do you think is the big miracle of this place? And she stopped and she looked at me and she said, the fact that this renewal of this parish is happening without any program or process. She said, back home, we have tried all kinds of programs and processes to try to get the parish to be renewed and pray and do things for people. And she said, it's just happening here. She said, that's the miracle. That God can change people's hearts to live their faith without anyone trying to force it. That's the miracle for me. I would see elderly people, native people to Medjugorje, get up out of their seats to let young children have a seat. Because you're a visitor, I have to do this for you. Would you like some water? I have to do this. You're a visitor, let me do this for you. The charity, the kindness that was being exuded. I mean, I don't know what we'd be like if we had people tramping all over our homes, through our yards, disturbing our work, disturbing our prayer time in church. They received it with generosity, kindness, and compassion. And they were merciful to all who visited them. To me, that's one of the biggest miracles of Medjugorje. It has led to the conversion of tens of thousands of people through the experiences, through the sacrament of reconciliation, through the attending of Mass, through the praying of the Rosary. And as Dave witnessed to himself, he wasn't planning on it, but it was God's plan. Who knows what God's plan is for you?